into this mix.
Hey everyone, this is Derek Rose with the Conscious Resistance Network and Activist Post. I'm at the Free Your Mind Conference 5 in Philadelphia, and today I'm talking with Michael Cremo, the author, researcher of many books, including The Hidden History of the Human Race. How are you doing?
Good.
Nice to meet you in person, and I wanted to give our audience a chance to get to know you before we get a little deeper into what your work focuses on. Could you tell us a bit about your background first?
Okay. I was born in a military family. My father was an intelligence officer for the United States Air Force, and that meant a couple things for me as I was growing up. One thing it meant is our family was moving to different countries around the world, different places, so I got exposed to a lot of different worldviews and cultures, and I could see there's more than one way to look at things. Mm-hmm. And among the worldviews I got exposed to was the worldview of ancient India. And eventually I became the disciple of a guru from India. And I studied the ancient Sanskrit writings. And in them I learned many things that were quite different from what I learned from my teachers in high school or university. One thing I learned in these ancient writings is that humans like us have been present on Earth for many, many millions of years. Of course, that's quite different from what I learned from my teachers. They were telling me humans like us first came into existence less than 100,000 or 200,000 years ago. Before that, there were no humans like us. So I began to wonder, well, is what these ancient books are telling me, is it simply mythology, or is there perhaps some factual basis for it? Yeah. And that's what got me looking into the history of archaeology. You know, when I looked in the current textbooks, I saw only the information that supported the current dominant theories of human origins, but I decided I'm going to look beyond the textbooks, and perhaps that is also explained by the fact that I grew up among people in the intelligence services. So I could understand there is such a thing as hidden knowledge. So that inspired me to look beyond the textbooks, dig into the original reports written by geologists, archaeologists, other scientists who are digging into the earth. And when I did that, I found many reports of archaeologists and other scientists finding human bones, human artifacts, and human footprints, many, many millions of years old. Oh, wow. So that kind of got me questioning, well, if these reports are there in the original scientific literature, if this is what scientists are actually finding, then why isn't it in the textbooks today? And I concluded it's because of a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the scientific world, whereby if you've got discoveries that support the dominant ideas, they make it through the filter. And you'll read about it in textbooks, you'll see scientists talking about these things. But if you've got reports of evidence that radically contradict the dominant theories, those reports tend to be filtered out, which means we don't hear very much about them. So I collected all those reports in a book called Forbidden Archaeology, which was 900 pages long. It was, some people asked, well, could we have a shorter version? So
is that what
I brought
this
out this, The Hidden History of the Human Race, which is a shorter version of Forbidden Archaeology, all the same cases, but explained in a more brief way.
Awesome. So I guess the first question is, so do you have a degree in archaeology, or did you just you pursued your own studies, or how is that for you?
No, I don't have a degree in archaeology. When I went to university, actually, I went to the George Washington University School of International Affairs. Originally, I was thinking of a career in the diplomatic service or one of the intelligence services, but I just got totally disillusioned with all of that and decided to take another path, a more spiritual path. And as I said, it was my studies in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India that inspired me to start looking into the history of archaeology, because those writings, in common with the writings of a lot of the ancient wisdom traditions, speak of extreme human antiquity, the idea that humans like us have been present on this earth for vast periods of time. So that's what got me into studying archaeology. So no, I don't have a PhD in archaeology, but I regularly speak at mainstream archaeology conferences, meetings of the World Archaeological Congress, the European Association of Archaeologists.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the like the reviews for your book. Obviously, you've got professors and researchers from all around the world, different universities. So the work does seem to be, at least if not ignored, somewhat respected. And is it well received generally, or have you been totally admonished and pushed out of the community?
It depends, because the way I look at it, the scientific community is not monolithic. Basically, I've found three groups in terms of their reactions to what I do. One group I call the fundamentalist materialists. They don't like what I do. They don't want to hear it. They don't want anyone else to hear it. I arrange lectures at a university. They'll try to get them canceled or something like that. So that's one reaction. And that's why I call my topic Forbidden Archaeology. But there's another group within the scientific world who may be supporters of the current theories, but they're open-minded enough to be able to be willing to listen to alternatives. And it's scientists in that category who have accepted my proposals to present papers at their scientific conferences. Actually, my latest book, called My Science, My Religion, is a collection of 24 papers I presented at mainstream scientific conferences. I mean, today I'm speaking at an alternative group here at the Free Your Mind conference, which is where many people would expect to see me. But I'm also able to present these ideas in the mainstream.
You can speak to the lay person as much as the scientific community.
Yeah. And so among that group that's open-minded, they may not agree with me, but at least they're willing to listen. And I think that's an important first step, because if ideas are going to change, first thing is people have to be willing to listen.
Absolutely.
Then among those who listen, there are actually some in the scientific world who agree with me. They're few in number, they're in a minority, but they do exist. Now, as far as the general public goes, I mean, surveys have shown most people don't accept the current dominant Darwinian evolutionary concepts of human origin. So as far as the people in general are concerned, many of them already accept what I'm saying, and they appreciate the information.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask, in your research, have you been able to uncover, or if you could even speculate on, if we have existed, for millions of years, is it really that the information is being suppressed, or are there, have the signs been wiped away? Like, as far as people talk about cataclysmic things throughout human history, is there any evidence of that humans having existed and something wiping them out, and maybe it's become forgotten over history, or is it more, in your research, a deliberate effort to cover up that fact that we have existed?
Well, it's both things. One doesn't rule out the other. I do think there have been periodic catastrophes after which the earth has had to be repopulated. So over those vast periods of time, evidence can get eliminated just by natural processes. So that can happen. But fossilization does occur, artifacts do survive, and they are there. Scientists do find them, but they try to dismiss them, forget about them, set them aside, explain them away. But they are there. So I think both things that you mentioned happen. There have been periodic catastrophes that have wiped out some of the geological records, some of the record of the rocks, you could say. But things do survive, and they get filtered out by this mindset of today's scientific community. So both things happen.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification on that. And the other thing that I appreciate that you're communicating about is like you said, there's this group or a mass that, you know, within the scientific community, that information gets filtered out, whether it's favorable to the current dogma or not. And when you're talking about the first group, this materialist, fundamentalist view, I definitely recognize that. You know, in my own work, we've talked about the work of, for example, Rupert Sheldrake, and talked about the science delusion, and the ideas that in some ways science can become, not the scientific method, but this scientific establishment can become just as dogmatic as, you know, any other group. And I feel like these sort of efforts to suppress or filter out information are a part of that. You know, do you think this is, and you know, I mean, obviously, if you understand your work is being pushed out and not welcomed by a certain community, has that allowed you to see that other areas of scientific research have been suppressed or ignored, or, you know, have you gone beyond just archaeology? Or
yes, absolutely. And you know, my book Forbidden Archaeology and its abridged edition Hidden History of the Human Race deal with archaeological evidence. But it means something. If there's archaeological evidence that contradicts the current theories, that means we need new explanations of human origins. And in my book Human Devolution, a Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory, I presented an alternative. And I said the first thing we have to ask is, what is a human being? I mean, before we ask where and when did human beings come about, we should first understand what is a human being. And most scientists today would say we are just machines made of molecules, like Richard Dawkins says. We're survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. It's a very materialistic concept that they're presenting. But I'm presenting a consciousness-based explanation of human origins. Originally, we're beings of pure consciousness. Consciousness exists independently from matter. And you know, there's a lot of scientific evidence that supports that there is a conscious self that can exist independently of the body, and it has very unusual powers. You were mentioning Rupert Sheldrake. He's kind of looked into some of these paranormal abilities that people have. I remember once we both, him and I, spoke at the same conference in Montreal, Canada, and you know, he was speaking about morphogenetic fields and how they are the carrier of different psychic abilities and things like that. So I think that's another whole area where a lot of knowledge filtration is going on. Studies of past life memories, out-of-body experiences, telepathy, remote viewing, things of that nature. There's a lot of scientific evidence for it, but it does get filtered out. Once I was speaking at a university in South Africa, and the students were on vacation, so my audience was about 150 professors from the university. And I spoke about my book, Forbidden Archaeology, and how the knowledge filtration process operates there. And after I gave the talk, different professors started coming up to me one by one. They'd kind of look around, see that nobody else was listening, and they say, I'm glad you talked about that knowledge filtration process because it's operating in my field, physics, and let me tell you about it. And then he'd go away, and another one would come and say, this knowledge filtration process, it operates in my field, chemistry, and let me tell you about it. So you're right. I think this knowledge filtering process operates in a lot of different fields, and I think the common element is behind the knowledge filtration process is that, as I said, the modern scientific consensus about humans, their origin, their nature, is very materialistic. They want to keep people indoctrinated in the idea that they're machines made of matter. And if you define a person's identity in a materialistic way so that people think I am a machine made of matter, then their goals and values become extremely materialistic. And they'll think that to produce and consume more and more material things is the main purpose of human life. And there's a whole worldwide human civilization that's been set up on that basis. All kinds of economic and political and financial and cultural institutions that are based on that. And it generates a lot of wealth that flows into the control of people who are gaming that system.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a big reason for the knowledge filtering process. Because if people had a different idea, for example, I'm a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness, we're all beings of pure consciousness, no need to divide ourselves into so many competing groups. Let's figure out how to satisfy our material necessities in the most simple, natural, fair, and efficient way possible, while putting most of our human energy into developing that resource of consciousness. We'd have an entirely different kind of civilization. The whole the set of structures that's in place now would disintegrate. And there are a lot of people who want to keep things the way they are, keep people thinking, I'm a machine made of matter, I should simply be a good producer and consumer of material things. So I think that's the fundamental motive behind the knowledge filtering process, to keep out the idea that there's something beyond matter, to keep out the idea that we're not alone in the universe, we're part of a whole cosmic hierarchy of conscious beings. I think that's the motive behind the knowledge.
Level. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I really appreciate that explanation, and I think many people are coming to those conclusions the more they question the establishment, whether it be the scientific establishment, the medical establishment, the establishment media, or the state itself, is that there's a lot of our world that's being hidden from us. And I do think a big part of that is, in a sense, a sort of spiritual war against us recognizing that we are beings of consciousness, of pure consciousness, and instead keeping us kind of trapped in a material prison of sorts, almost. Keeping people only thinking on that level. I really appreciate that, how your work is really informed by your Vedic research and those traditions. A lot of my work as well explores the intersections of anarchism or the freedom message with spiritual traditions, and getting people to recognize that before both the state and political class came along, we had shamans all around the world and people interpreting their beliefs in a number of different ways, and really realizing the true consciousness of themselves and the light within themselves. And over time we've got this sort of, again, this come read our books or come to our priestly class and you can find your way to the great place. Come through us or work through our systems, and it's I think it's a real issue. So if you wouldn't mind, if someone is interested in getting into the Vedic traditions and learning about that, where's a good place to start, or how did you get your start, I guess?
Well, I got my start, my really serious start, when I received a copy of Bhagavad-Gita at a Grateful Dead concert in 1973 in upstate New York. There were some followers of the Vedic path there, and they gave me a copy of that book. And there was an interesting thing. According to Bhagavad-Gita, God, Krishna, says, abandon all varieties of religion. And I thought that's really amazing. God is saying, abandon all varieties of religion. In other words, get into the actual awareness of the conscious self and its relationship with the source of all conscious beings and other in other words, make it experiential.
Yeah.
So, I would say if a person was interested in the Vedic spiritual path, have a look at Bhagavad-Gita.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, and I'll put that information below for those who haven't heard of the Bhagavad-Gita.
Actually, on my website, mcremo.com, there's a special offer. If people purchase my latest book, My Science, My Religion, where I show how I integrate my spirituality and science, if they get that book, they'll also have the option of getting a free copy of the Bhagavad-Gita,
there you go,
which forms the inspiration for a lot of the work that I do. Now, I don't claim to have a monopoly on truth, or that truth can only be found in this tradition.
Sure.
I think the truth can be found in a lot of different places, but you're asking what my inspiration was.
Yeah.
But I look at it as kind of like, like if you have gold, gold is gold. You can make it into coins and stamp it with the symbols of different nations, but if it's really gold, it doesn't matter what symbol that you've stamped on it.
There's many paths that we can take towards this understanding of ourselves.
Yeah, I think exclusive claims to truth are one of the big problems in the world today.
Absolutely.
One of the sources of conflict.
Where can people find? You mentioned mcremo.com. Is that the main website where we could find more books?
That's my main website, mcremo.com, mcremo.com. I also have a Facebook page, Michael Cremo. It's really